Reference the last hour of this retreat is designated for discussion or for questions and answers. We could say we may revert to a bit of a seminar mode, which means that I ask you the questions and you have to raise your hand if you think you have a specific answer. Then, I'm going to give you one idea about the Buddha's instructions for how we get out of this mess. At any moment, based on the contact, that's where you've got your sense faculty, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. You have your sense faculty and the corresponding object and the corresponding type of consciousness, the knowing ability. They come together. That moment is called contact. Contact is the condition for the arising of what is felt as pleasant, painful, or neutral. When you experience a pleasant feeling, if you approve, welcome, and keep clinging to it, then the underlying tendency to greed, realize that. When you experience a painful feeling, if you sorrow and wail and lament, beating your breast and falling into confusion, the underlying tendency to repulsion underlies that. When you experience a neutral feeling, if you don't truly understand that feeling, its origin, ending, gratification, drive, and escape, the underlying tendency to ignorance underlies that. The Buddha said, without giving up the underlying tendency to greed or pleasant feeling, without dispelling the underlying tendency to repulsion towards painful feeling, without eradicating ignorance in the case of neutral feeling, without giving up ignorance, without giving rise to knowledge, it is quite impossible to make an end to suffering in this present life. So, my seminar question for you is, when there's a pleasant feeling, to give up that greed. Whoever has an answer from it. If you have an answer from it, you have to speak. You have to speak to the monkey. Go up. Thank you. Feeling more fast. Impermanent is FM.
She's saying the pleasant feeling is impermanent.
Yeah, impermanence. Yes, it's one of the strongest contemplations to escape from greed, as the contemplation of impermanence. When pleasant things come, we would like to keep them and hold them and keep them close to us. But we must keep telling ourselves it's impermanent. There's something else we could tell ourselves. It's not mine.
Mine.
What's the answer?
Not mine.
What's the answer?
Aya, the audio.
So this is a way you can talk to yourself. And just so people hesitate. If you
Can't hear you.
Yes.
Aya, we can't hear you clearly.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
Perhaps to practice having awareness of what's around you. So for example, if you like chocolate a lot or ice cream or something, you can become lost in the sensations and only focus on sensations, but having awareness of what is surrounding you, where you are, as in meditation, perhaps refocusing on your breath rather than allowing that sensation to take over your consciousness.
Yeah. This is a very good technique. So that object or that sensation, which is giving rise to pleasure, tends to dominate the mind. So that's the only thing you see. And you don't see other things that are happening at the same time. So trying to balance the mind by directing awareness to something else which is neutral. Actually, this works for all three. When there's a strongly unpleasant something, if you don't become obsessed with the thing that's unpleasant, but direct the mind towards something which is neutral. It's like if you're in a conversation in a room, you might notice that some people talk the most. Some people always have an answer, they always have something to say. Are they talk in a way that's dominating? But there may be somebody else in the room who's more quiet, who hangs back, who doesn't get heard, doesn't get paid attention to. And so if you would direct your awareness to the quiet person and ask them a question and wait for them to speak and listen to them, then you can get something very valuable by listening to the one who is quieter. The same way when there's experiences that are very delicious and delightful, but loud, you go to the thing that's more quiet. Things that are very unpleasant and horrible, you look around and find something else which is more quiet, and pay attention to that. Yeah.
With the sensation and the thoughts together at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. And learn that give a name to the thought, so whatever comes out, just give it a name and then you look at it and say, is that what I'm thinking?
Uh-huh. Thank you. Another way of undermining greed is looking at causation. So what is the previous conditions that's causing the greediness? It could be that, as it was said in the sutta about the two arrows, if we were in a circumstance that was unpleasant, and then we want to get out of that. And we want to run over to something pleasant in a way of escaping, covering up something unpleasant. So we want to cover up our anxiety with ice cream. We want to cover up our depression with entertainment or distraction. So if we look underneath, lift up the rock, look underneath and see what was behind it, and then also projecting ahead and looking at what it is leading to, we can see that because of impermanence, it won't last very long. And then the other question was giving up revulsion towards unpleasant feelings. And now this, I think, is even more difficult to do sometimes, because you could think, I ought to be repelled and repulsed by that because that thing is dangerous. Like you wouldn't want to jump into a cesspit, and the revolting smell would make you stop from jumping into it. Or you wouldn't want to take up politics, because the disgusting smell of the corruption of the people who like that occupation is something that, you know, makes you feel uncomfortable, and so you stay away from it. Or when you go to protest against cruelty, or protesting against injustice, or protesting against stupidity, you could say, well, that cruelty, that injustice, and that stupidity is really bad for the world, and so I should use my repulsion as a motivator so that I can go to battle and fight against evil. Now, this is not what the Buddha is saying. So who can tell me the skillful way to be in the world and to take care of the problems in the world without having to feed ourselves with a lot of repulsion, a lot of repulsion towards unpleasant things? Yeah. Yeah. Clear comprehension. It's so simple. When confronted with something unpleasant, the mind can easily start to make up a very big story about how bad that thing is. So this story that gets fabricated, and then we are trying to do battle, and we're battling against a story. We're battling against a fairy tale. We're battling against some fabrication. You know, like that the other people are bad and our people are good and those people are bad. And what it is, you know, those people eat babies and those people are horrible in 10 different ways. And so we tell this great big fairy tale to keep ourselves and others stirred up in repulsion. But if you looked with clear comprehension and see situations and people as they actually are, then they say to understand is to forgive. And then they say that seeing things as they are, one could accurately and skillfully see if there's any part of the causation that might be changeable. We can still do our best to take care of problems, but we don't have to do it with being stirred up with repulsion, becoming obsessed by unpleasant feelings. There's a phrase that I read from Ajahn Thanissaro, who he attributed to his teacher, who's called Ajahn Subat. And the question is this: is a mountain heavy? Yes? Who says it's heavy? Okay. It may be heavy in and of itself, but as long as we don't try to lift it up, it won't be heavy for us. So it's that upadana that I spoke of earlier, that taking up, that absorbing, appropriating, and making something part of my identity, which is trying to pick up the mountain of all the trouble and woe, and trying to then carry it as part of our shell, part of our furniture, part of our clothing, and trying to carry all that, then it's very heavy. But if we know it's not part of ourself, we can take care of it with kindness and compassion without absorbing. Is there a question you?
I had a thought. Like, even if like there's people say like, okay, this mic is very light, but if I keep holding on to it forever, it's going to be heavy. So similarly, like,
Yes.
is that thought?
I can ask a question also.
Yes, Kim.
You said about not identifying, but as parents, like, we identify a lot with our children's pain. And, our own pain, we can learn to see the impermanence but when it comes to our children's pain, like, I don't know how to not pick it up, or like all the wisdom fails actually. I don't know, in your own life, like, have you found, not having fear for the people you loved through your years of own practice?
This is a wonderful question, and I will tell you that I've made the same mistake. Like, if something is difficult for me, I'm able to say, well, it's okay, I don't mind, I can tolerate this because I know how much I'm able to tolerate. But then if it's somebody else that I care for and I don't know how much they're able to tolerate or how much is going to break them. And even I think as a parent or as a as a woman or a man, there's something that was wired into us as part of our instinct as a human being to like jump into the fire to save our own child without giving any regard to our own welfare. So we ignore what's good for us, just wanting to help the child. But when we are studied in the Dhamma, we realize that it's not really possible to help another if we are harming ourselves. Sacrificing oneself to benefit another person, even our own child, is not really possible. Now, we know that when the child were depending on us, we spent a lot of sleepless nights taking care of them and walking them, and we did a lot of extra work. Taking them to school and feeding them and giving them all the things they need and finding out what they need and taking them to the doctor and taking them to their music lessons and taking them to their sport activities and taking them around here and there to all these things. And we became even like exhausted, and we maybe were putting so much energy for our children. And it may have felt like we don't have enough energy left to take care, even looking after our own health. But at some level, we really have to protect ourselves. If we make ourselves so ill, we will not be able to take care of them. And when we come to a grown-up relationship, then we have to try to satisfy both conditions. Each choice we make should be good for us and good for the other. So being generous, kind, and giving is good for us. And also being able to receive what others freely give is also good for us, good for the other. To protect and guard ourselves by not doing anything which is immoral or improper is very good for us. And it's also very good for the one we're helping. There's the metaphor of the acrobat. The little one is standing at the top of a tall pole, and the strong one is down at the bottom, holding up the pole and balancing it. And the strong acrobat down the bottom says, "Don't worry, my dear, I'll take care of you." And this little acrobat at the top says, "Darling, you just take care of yourself. When you take care of yourself, you will be taking care of me. And I will take care of myself. And when I take care of myself, I will be taking care of you." And so this is really what we need to aim for. Now, you can't always be perfect in trying to take care of your children. You have to make a choice, and you're not sure what's the right choice each time. So then you need to be very clear about what your motivation is. Are you just being greedy because you want to look good? Do you want to be the best parent in the whole PTA because you're the most active and doing the most things for the children? Or is it because of true love and kindness? And so then when you are doing your best, making your best effort with the intention for the children to succeed and be successful in life, even if at some point they could criticize you or resent you, later on when they grow up and they look back and they think about it, they'll say, "Well, Mom and Dad always did their best. No matter what, I know they were always trying to do their best for me." And that's the thing I appreciate and remember, no matter if they sometimes made some mistakes. So being clear with your intentions and having intentions which are not hurting yourself, but protecting yourself as well as protecting your children. They are the owners of their own karma. They will make some mistakes, and we hope that they'll have the ability to hear the Dhamma, to be able to come out of whatever those mistakes may be, and to come into a virtuous, loving, happy and wise condition after they've gotten through their struggles with growing up. Yeah.
I work with a lot of parents and kids, so the thing I see is, a lot of the times there is a deep attachment that the parent feels maybe affected by the child's emotional suffering, kind of also makes them feel like, I can fix this, and they try to fix it, but that approach doesn't help the child a lot of the times. So do you also suggest that we need to work on like practicing detachment as a way to help them to look as a separate individual on their journey, or we have any other strategies?
We know that in family life, attachment is unavoidable. if a parent were completely detached from the child, from a young child or an infant, they would possibly not be growing up in a healthy way. So part of the process that we have to go through is we have to experience our natural nature as being the type of animal, which is a social animal, which is connected to our babies, and the babies are depending on us for many years. And so during that time of dependency, we have to be taking care of them. There is a certain amount of attachment that grows during that time. But even while that's happening, we should be reminding ourselves that this is impermanent. This child is not going to always be there for me. I could lose this child. I can't hold on to this forever. I can't be the dear mommy forever. So even while you have the attachment, you realize that you're going to need to let it go. And so you can that way have some healthy attachment and then later on be able to let go. And you can have detachment by not forming ideas like that your ego is built up by your position as being the mother, or your ego is not being built up by seeing how smart and good your children are, that your ego is not being fed and aggrandized by accumulating and acquiring and being the owner of your children. You are not the owner of your children. And then you can have a healthy kind of detachment, which is realizing that they have their own freedom, they make their own karma. And you can have a healthy kind of attachment, which lets you know when to guide them, when to give them feedback, when to be, talking to them and reflecting to them. Even I heard that if the parent like looks at the child and says, well, you're a very, this type of a child, like you're a very shy little girl, but in your own quiet way, you have a lot of courage. Okay, so that little girl, she hears, okay, I'm shy, but I have courage. And then by what's reflected from what they hear from the parents or their loved ones, then they're able to like develop a personality and use their strengths and overcome their weaknesses. Or if the child doesn't know how to manage their time and the parent says, well, you must do your homework from this hour to this hour, you must work on homework, and they stand there and make you do it. Well, this is giving the child something, an ability to manage, which they will then use the rest of their life. So that's a part of healthy attachment, that you take the trouble to do those things. But it's not, you don't own that child. And your worth as a human being is not dependent on having that child or having that child be in a certain way. Yeah.
The little bit dukkha, the young child is a very good opportunity to watch. And chitta is not developed, right? The mental cognition is literally farther than the lunge. So equanimity, as it turns out, is the biggest draw in terms of young things. You can see it. They're proof if you're honest with your own values. We're used to it, and we don't give a lot of deliberation. But it's not even neutral. It's unpleasant. The baby doesn't know what to do with it. But if you can just envision the Buddha, smile, here we are in samsara. They born with it, and this too shall pass. I have 4 adult children, and one of them is I have to let go all the time. And it is my queen, so clear it's my queen, coming right each time. Morning is a beautiful thing. But if you can do that with teenagers and their parents, if we can just, because fixing it is what we want to do as adults and our own babies today, even at 37. But if we can hold that in awareness and just be receptive, hear the pain, it's hard, because you've already made a mistake. You can trace your behavior, your bad parenting, it's clear then. But that's where we are. And that it's very validating for an adult child, you almost just say nothing, but truly feel their pain, their grief. I'm sure there's Genesis in it. Oh, you're very simple, you adopt, whatever it is, like we've all done it. That receptivity that the nuns and the monks give us every moment, we come and we're just 10,000 hours and pushing off a cushion, but you can't do it for a moment. You memorize. I memorize it. I just memorize it. And the good it does is off the chart. The babies. And then they go toddle and throw something. But for the moment, that receptivity, tell that to the parents, the receptivity and equanimity, it helps in a huge amount.
I'm going to read a poem about this. This is called The Beloved. And it's a chapter in the Dhammapada. Applying yourself where you ought not, neglecting what you should be doing, forgetting your goal, you cling to what you hold dear, jealous of those devoted to their own goal. Don't ever get too close to those you like or dislike, for not seeing the liked is suffering, and so is seeing the disliked. Therefore, don't hold anything dear, for it's bad to lose those you love. No ties are found, and they who hold nothing, loved are loathed. Sorrow springs from what we hold dear. Fear springs from what we hold dear. One free from holding anything dear has no sorrow, let alone fear. Sorrow springs from attachment. Fear springs from attachment. One free from attachment has no sorrow, let alone fear. Sorrow springs from relishing. Fear springs from relishing. One free from relishing has no sorrow, let alone fear. Sorrow springs from desire. Fear springs from desire. One free from desire has no sorrow, let alone fear. Sorrow springs from craving. Fear springs from craving. One free from craving has no sorrow, let alone fear. But one accomplished in virtue and vision, firm in the Dhamma and truthful, doing oneself what ought to be done, that's who the people love. One eager to realize the ineffable would be filled with awareness. Their mind is not bound to pleasures of sense. They're said to be heading upstream. When a man or a woman returns safely after a long time spent abroad, family, friends, and loved ones celebrate their return. Just so, when one has done good, when one who has done good goes from this world to the next, their good deeds receive them there as family welcomes home. one they love. So your blood family is not your real family. Your real family is the karma that you do, the good deeds that you do, and the results of those deeds, which are to be received, or which will come to you again in the future, which may come to you in another life. Your karma is really your mother. Karma is your father. Karma is your relatives, your protectors. And the karma that you create will be the karma that becomes your inheritance in the future. So, even though we say that we own nothing, nevertheless, we hear this metaphor about karma being like something, okay, we don't really own it, but the results of the karma that we do will come to us in the future. Just like meeting your family after being separated for a long time. And we still have time for more questions.
Nobody's going to ask any more questions, because I already have questions. I will ask one. I think this poem was helpful to the dilemma that I've been experiencing lately, and but I'll share it with you anyway. For myself, I think in terms of repulsion and attraction, I think in the last few years, I've begun to feel a little repulsion towards myself and all of other human beings. And I think because of what we brought on the planet, and I've been really trying to. It makes me feel less connected to humanity, and yet, because it's hard for me not to take it into myself because I'm a human being, right? And I've contributed in the same way everybody else has. And I don't really know, I also don't have a lot of power to change things. So I can only sit with my frustration, and part of that is, I mean, I'm going to die probably sooner rather than later, whether it's due to the effects of climate change or something else, right? So it doesn't have a lot of personal import to me, but I think for me, there's a certain level of disenchantment with the world and feeling like not really feeling connected with. We all are interconnected, but we're also interconnected in a negative way. And with our negative energy and the negative things that we do. So I'm just kind of wondering if you have any words of wisdom on how to view our role in climate change and how to view our feelings about them. Thank you.
In the sutta, there's a description of, perhaps it's a mythology, how the world evolves in the eons of time, how history evolves, and how there can be a gradual, long trend of corruption in society, where society becomes more and more cruel, more and more corrupt, more and more immoral, where they have in the sutta they call it a certain intervals of time in which killing is approved of. That would be what we call a war, in which children become sexualized at a very young age, in which the lifespan becomes shorter and shorter. And so then what happens in the mythology is that some good people look around, and during the war, they run away and go into the forest and survive by eating fruits and roots and acorns and things that they can scavenge in the forest. And they hide there while the war is going on. And then they come out when the war has come to its end and look around, and they find some of their friends. And they say, "Oh, friend, are you alive?" And they say, "Yes, friend, I survived, I'm still alive." And then they say, "Friend, what if we tried to refrain from killing? What if we tried to give up stealing, to give up sexual misconduct, lying, and using intoxicants? What if we tried practicing mindfulness and meditation?" And so right there, in the middle of the disaster zone, the small group of people decides to begin to practice. And with their practice, it becomes like a contagion of goodness. And then the goodness begins to spread because people see that it's beautiful. They see that it's happy. They see that it's lovable and dear to be in that kind of a society with people living that way. And then society as a whole gradually starts a sort of like an upwards evolution where people expect to be good, and they expect that by being good will lead to happiness. And it's kind of a self-reinforcing synergy. The whole society becomes good until finally all of the beings are so good that they all are born in heaven. And so there's no more like flesh beings left in the actual world. And they live in heaven for another, many thousands of eons, and until then something happens. You have these beings who are living on radiance. They live on light, the radiance of their own kindness and their good needs. But then one of them thinks, this light that I'm living on, I wonder if it would be tasty and delicious. Let me take a taste. They take a taste and say, "Oh, this is delicious." And with that, the light congeals and it becomes honey. And then so they're living on honey. And then one of them thinks, suppose I saved up a whole barrel of honey, and then I would have some for later on. And then they start dropping down from the heavenly state and becoming more and more gross, more and more painful. And finally, like they fall back to earth, and no longer is it easy, and no longer can they just live on honey or just live on air, but then they have to struggle and sweat and work. And then somebody tries stealing, and then they need a king to stop the stealing, so they elect the person who's the most beautiful to be the king. And then that king, they catch the thief, and they tell him not to do it, but people keep stealing, and then they have to cut off their hands or cut off their ears or kill them or torture them, and so then the world starts to go down again in this downward spiral. So at any moment of time, we can choose goodness, and we can be loud and proud about goodness. We don't have to do it in secret. let the world see that there's a different way, that even though our society is structured in favor of greed, and maybe society is favored in favor of lying and aggression and conflict, nevertheless, we can be blatantly kind, blatantly simple, blatantly good. Let the world see it. And if you want to get involved in politics, you could speak to the king or speak to the leader and say, dear madam or dear sir, please give up killing. I request that you give up lying and stealing, and that you avoid sexual misconduct, and avoid being addicted to intoxicants or anything else. And if you could do that, you got my vote. And so this is like the recommendation that I find in the sutras. So the disaster is always happening. I mean, I know it seems like our disaster is worse than all the other disasters, but societies have completely collapsed and gone into ruin in the past. And it might be that our human society will go into ruin before we're able to get out of the way and allow what's left of nature to start to retrieve itself. We don't know what's going to happen, but we can be good, and we should do it publicly. One more comment?
Question. I see in the temple there are like a lot of
Hold
figures
it to your mouth so we can hear you.
there are a lot of figures of dragons. Is there a specific reason, or is there a significance of the dragons? Is it like show like warning us to beware of danger, or I don't know.
I'm a little bit hard of hearing, so I'm sorry.
I couldn't hear the question either. I was gonna ask you to repeat it. Maybe if you turn around and face us. I know you're asking Naya.
For us, like the dragons, I see everywhere in the Buddhist temples. Is there any significance of dragons?
Those are actually, what?
You're going to explain the Nagas? Are they Nagas?
Yes.
Okay.
So they're actually Nagans, which are what we think of as kind of like a dragon, but they're a sea serpent. And they're the protectors of the temple. There's a story about the Buddha and the Nagas. You probably know better than I do. Could you share it?
Do you know the story? Was that before or after his awakening? Yeah. You might see, sometimes you see the picture of the Buddha, and behind his head is a type of snake. He's almost like making an umbrella with his gills at the side. So there was a weather, or there was rain, and then the Naga came and provided a shelter so that the newly awakened Buddha was able to continue with his meditation for a period of time like that. So that's one. There are many stories about about Nagas in the different tales, especially the Jataka tales. Maybe not that much in the suttas.
Actually, the concept of Nagas is very steep in Hindu mythology. I'm sure like there is some continuation like this. Certain like motives were adopted by
Mhm.
like Lord Vishnu. He's supposed to be sleeping on a Naga, right? Like so, and it's associated with Krishna, and like I think it all came from Hindu mythology.
Yeah.
Or,
This comment is about how important the Naga is in Hindu mythology. And of course, we know that Hinduism and Buddhism developed side by side. So in a way, like they were, I don't know, cousins or relatives, that they both came from, in part came from a common root and have had influence on each other through their historical evolution since the life of the Buddha.
It's right there.
I have a question for you. In the past, in some of your Dhamma talks, or at least a Dhamma talk, you've mentioned that as time has gone on, you think that it's possible that the Buddha has been made more glorified, and that those texts about certain events in the Buddha's life have been maybe made exaggerated or something like this. And I'm wondering how one would discern, because I feel a lot of doubt sometimes when I read certain stories. Like, for example, up here there's an image of the baby, the Bodhisattva, as after being born, walking 7 steps and speaking. And how can one discern when they read stories like this? Or do we need to discern when we read stories like this what is true and what is an example of text that has been maybe made more glorified than it originally was?
This question is coming from the modern perspective. So in earlier times, not only in the Buddhist world, but also in the European and all of the cultures of the whole world, it seemed that there were several different planes or levels of reality that were allowed to represent each other. So, like, I'm especially familiar with European culture because that's where I came from. In the medieval times, the rose was considered the highest of all the flowers, and the lion was considered the highest of all the beasts, and Jesus was considered the highest of all the men. And so then there came to be a kind of a conflation where one could stand for the other. So a story about the lion is actually a story about the Christ, or a story about the rose, or something like that. And actually, this was a world where when you looked around and stepped out of your house and stepped into the forest or into the farmland, every place around you, you could experience what was sacred, what was like a reality beyond the ordinary, everyday human reality. And being in direct touch with that reality, and even doing representing that reality through ceremonies, through bowing, through chanting, and through praying and reflections, through giving certain kinds of gifts which are traditional objects. You always like the same object is always given at the same time. So those gestures are putting us in contact with different levels of reality that are different than this sort of logical, rational level. It's the same way that if you watch a play or watch a movie or listen to a musical performance, sometimes some truth can come to be known at a more deep, intuitive level than if you just went to a lecture and heard a historian or some kind of a scholar who was explaining things in a logical way. And well, you could understand it logically, but you wouldn't really understand it. Whereas understanding it emotionally or intuitively or at a different level, it makes it meaningful and significant and impacting on life. And so this is the way that the faith traditions have operated for a long time. The modern world has lost something when, again, I know European history more so than Asian history. I know that during the 18th century, like when the United States started, there was a tremendous revulsion against many of these traditions. And they said it's all a lot of fakery. It's not real. And they rejected the traditions and the rites and rituals of religion. They used to have religious holidays at least 4 or 5 or 6 times a month. They had religious holidays where people would stop work and go and celebrate in a religious way. And they gave it all up. They became rational. Time became flat. Science became like the only reality that was admitted was the scientific reality. They imagined that God was like some scientist who built a clock. The world was a clock that had been built by God, and God and the world was just, running around with its gears, acting in a predictable way according to the rules and the laws that had been given out by God. And so in this way, our reality became flat. Time became flat. So it used to be in the olden days that, like, at the time of Vesak, Buddha's birthday, you would be closer to the Buddha on the Vesak day than you would be close to something to do with your job that has to happen next month. Because that celebration, you're putting yourself in touch with that cycle of that spiritual story. So time was like that. It was deep, putting us in connection with the deepest reality. But now, in a modern time, time is flat. And the Buddha was 2,600 years ago, and he's very far away, and we could barely even understand what he was driving at, because we're barely even in touch with him because it was so long ago. And so it's something that those of us who are from the Asian cultural background are participating in traditional Buddhism, you ought to think about it and think, what's happening to my country? Are we keeping in touch with the old ways? Are we keeping in touch with the depth and the magic of our traditional culture? Are we going to just throw it all away and just become capitalist scientists? It's a choice that people can make, and we should try to be, intelligent, and or maybe after the war is over, we can come out of the forest and find our friend and say, "Oh, dear friend, are you alive?" And then say, besides following the precepts, say, well, let's remember the Buddha's birthday. Let's remember the day of his awakening, the day of his parinibbana, by celebrating it and being close and letting those things be, as close as this to us on the Vesak day. So that's my answer to your question. I love that question. I've thought about it quite a bit. Because like you, I'm a modern person, and when I was growing up, I always said, this world is awfully flat. You know, my ancestors used to be able to be saints. And they had so much inspiration, but now when I look around, it's all just flat. How did it get like that? And so we don't have to, well, we still have maybe a chance to choose. Yes. I didn't even know you were here.
I just need to comment on this because I've always appreciated that my Asian heritage has helped me,
Speak into the mic.
realize reality is far bigger than we can imagine. And just living in our lifetimes or our history, we have Mozart, a child genius. We have the evidence of Tibetan monastics who can identify extremely in a verified way. So to me, it's not a very far stretch of the imagination that the Buddha, who had the karma of his past to be who he is, might be reborn and have all that wisdom just right at his fingertips as an infant.
Okay, we're coming up to the end of our time. Now we're in overtime. And I welcome your comments, but just to know if somebody needs to leave, they can leave. Or if we'd like to stay and keep chatting, we can.
You know, when I look at a Buddha statue, I think some monk only told me that don't think of Buddha as an historical Buddha, but think of Buddha as the ability within you to see through truth and impermanence and all the truths. So, you know, that is easier for me. It's harder for me to worship, although I come from Asian heritage. I find it easier to relate in that way.
Yeah. Dear ones, may your confidence in the Dhamma and your trust of the Buddha and the teachings that he laid down, and may you have confidence that it's possible for the human being to follow this practice and to realize what the Buddha pointed out. And may your confidence in this triple gem give you the motivation, the strength, and the wisdom to carry on with your practice, never to give up, never to turn the wrong way, never to become discouraged, but to keep on with this straight practice, looking to go deeper and deeper. Let's close with the blessing of the triple gem. Araham Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddha Bhagavanta Abhivadini. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sarvaka Sangha Sangham Nama. Sampai Buddha Bala Bata Pachakana Jayandalam Avahantanam Chate Jena Vakam Bandhani Sava So
Is that okay? Everybody want to be in one big photo?
Photo? Sure. Yeah. Let's tidy up the space a little bit.
Yeah, and also if you can stay after the photo to help with the chairs, that would be.